Welcome, everyone. We're now live. So we will be providing this recording to folks that weren't able to attend and for your perusal afterwards. We will reserve any questions for the end, hopefully, but if something pops up, please put it in the chat. We'll do our best to answer it, and I will read out any questions that you all have. And yeah, let's get this webinar started. So I am, and hello again, my name is Carla Ortega Santori, and in my role as Strategic Initiatives Manager at the Doerr Institute, I manage the LPP classification. My background is in IO psychology, so measurement is near and dear to my heart. I have also seen firsthand at the Doerr Institute the value of demonstrating impact and carefully assessing what it is we do. So I'm very excited to discuss this today, and I am joined by Dr. Ann Pomerantz, our new Assistant Director. Do you want to?
No, I know how to use Zoom.
Big news, yeah.
Years of using it. Hi everyone, I'm Aaron Pomerantz. I am the new Assistant Director of Research and Evaluation at the Doerr Institute. Like Carla, I have a background in psychology. Mine is specifically in social psych, and I actually, in my graduate program, I actually got to minor in quantitative psychology and specialized in measurement and validating measures and developing measures, which is a real passion of mine. And I'm glad to be able to bring that here to Doerr and apply it to the topic of leader development. And this class is a part of that effort for me. So I'm really happy to be here and discuss this all with you.
Thanks, Aaron. And for us to get started, I think our very first task, and it's the most important thing really in your LPP applications and really in your own programs, right? When you're defining what it is you want to do and what you want to accomplish. I think it's really important that we start with the LPP definition, or the Leadership for Public Purpose definition, because most of your application will be in line with this, and most of your programs will be in line with what it is you define as leader development or leadership development. So I would love to know, what does LPP mean to you or your campus? So please put that in the chat. It doesn't have to be a complete conceptual model. You can have a sort of formed thought or approach to this. We would love to hear more. If you have a few words, just put it in the chat and I will read those aloud. And I'll give you a minute because that's a very complicated and deep question. So. And if you're struggling to come up with a concept or theory, you can also mention some activities that you think are aligned to LPP. All right, Phyllis, new to the concept, but would like to learn more. Great, you're in the right place. And we'll talk more about what we at Carnegie and the Doerr Institute define as LPP. So don't worry. Tony says, creating an institutional environment that develops students to seek opportunities to serve their communities. Great. I see some public purpose in this definition, right? And it alludes to that. So love the idea of creating an environment. It speaks to nurturing the system or creating a culture where these kinds of practices or behaviors and initiatives are fostered. So that's great. Art says, at UNG, it is a commitment to developing leaders who are focused on making a positive impact, not only within their immediate environment, but also on a broader scale, both regionally and globally. Great. Positive impact also speaks to this idea of public purpose. And you're talking about a scale, right, of regional and global. That's great that you have that specificity. Chelsea says, we use the phrase leadership for the public good to refer to leadership that makes a positive change in our communities and the world. That's the type of leadership we encourage our students to think about and develop. That's great. Positive change also alludes to this idea of public purpose. You're talking about communities, the world, I think similar to what Art at UNG is talking about. Jason, at PCC, we see leadership for public purpose as developing skill sets and experiences that enable our people to contribute towards a better world and better way of being. Again, the public purpose piece, and you talk about skill sets and experiences. So you're getting a little bit more operational on what kinds of things constitute those efforts. Great. Katie says, embedding servant leadership ideals into curricular and co-curricular programming. Here to learn more, though. Great. And servant leadership is a concept that some of you may be familiar with, things like transformational leadership, servant leadership, all these kinds of concepts and models are things that we hear and see often in LPP applications as well. Maritza says, it's an important part of the university role to serve the community it serves by creating opportunities for innovation and community development through the academic programs, internships, and other services. So you talk about specifically what types of practices, I think, within the university achieve this, which is great. Dustin says, LPP is a values-based approach and commitment to developing leaders that contribute to the greater good within their teams, communities, region, and world. I love this idea of values-based, this idea of commitment, developing leaders, again, talking about public purpose in this definition. Teresa says, supporting the development of personal guiding principles that allow individuals to be good citizens, family members, friends, colleagues, etc. I like this. It talks about development. It talks about the kinds of, I guess, environments or communities where these students or folks, individuals really, are moving through and impacting. And Kuria says, creating objective impact to followers, challenges. Objective impact, that sounds interesting. The idea of including followers also in this definition is great, not something that we see often, but it has been brought up a lot recently. So interesting that we should see that now. And let's compare some of these things that you've all shared here. And thank you again for sharing. This was a lot more than I was hoping for, so thank you. Let's compare it to the Carnegie definition of LPP. And thank you, Erin, for putting that up. I'll let you read through that, but what I'll say is, at its core, leadership for public purpose is about contributing to this idea of a better, more just society, something that you've all mentioned, I think, in your definitions. It's not just about who holds these formal leadership positions, it's about building ethical leadership capacity across the campus, across the institution, and across roles. It centers really about or around the common good, and it's relevant in every sector of society. That's why we sort of mention it in the definition later on. And this definition emphasizes both institutional coordination and broad impact. And a lot of you talked about where, you see this impact going regionally, globally, et cetera. And it's about how your campus creates these conditions for everyone to lead with this purpose and with responsibility. And also, very importantly, it's not just student facing, so it spans faculty, staff, even partnerships, we've heard, alumni. So it's a very broad definition. It's meant to create an opportunity for you all to also envision your approach to LPP and be able to fit that within this idea of a broad understanding of betterment of society and all these great things, and for you to see how you individually execute that on your campuses. So more on the Carnegie Elective Classification before we go into Erin's portion, which is by far more entertaining and more practical in what you'll hear. I've also just heard this part so many times because I have presented on it. So I'm excited for you to hear more from Erin. But the Carnegie Elective Classification for LPP is a way for colleges and universities to examine how they are developing leaders. So everyone involved in the institution has to work together to answer this self-study. This process is meant to be, or to help the campus improve and really celebrate their efforts to develop leaders. So the Carnegie Elective Classifications were created to gather information that isn't covered in the universal or standard Carnegie classification. So the system that indicates or designates R1s, R2s, etc. It was created as sort of a countermeasure to that and to rankings and all of these ideas. It is a self-study, so it looks at everything the campus does to develop leaders, including things like policies, assessments, and we'll look at the sections in a few in a minute. But in 2020, the Doerr Institute for New Leaders at Rice University and the Carnegie Foundation began developing this idea of a new elective classification focused on leadership. It was later named the Leadership for Public Purpose Classification. The LPP classification launched its first national cohort in 2024, and we designated 25 campuses for their commitment to developing leaders for the common good. And they are still designated or classified, and you can see who those are on our website. But let me give you a preview of what the classification or the application really looks like. And we have whittled down the application from, I think, 14 sections to 8 now. So in 2024, we had a sort of lengthier application. We have since refined that with an ad hoc committee that reviewed the entirety of the application. It reviewed feedback from past applicants, from people that were classified and were not classified. They reviewed feedback from reviewers and other experts in the field. And we came up with this sort of reduced version. It's meant to be more efficient and more concise in the data and evidence that it asks for. So these 8 sections, first section, I think is pretty self-explanatory. Just we want to know who we're in contact with and that we have the right people at our institution. The campus and community context, we want you to set the stage. So what does LPP mean within your campus? It's about defining LPP and describing the environment of your campus and how LPP sort of fits in. Our third section, institutional factors, talks about, or will ask you about the foundational elements that support LPP work across the campus. So things like mission, vision, values, strategic priorities, how are all these aligned with LPP? Number 4, human resources. How are your faculty, staff, and administrators involved in LPP? So what kind of professional development and support do they receive? Number 5, curricular LPP is focused on LPP as it is embedded within your academic programs. So think about courses, majors, minors, other credit-bearing experiences that foster LPP within your campus. And then number 6, co-curricular leadership is sort of beyond the classroom. So non-credit programs, student organizations, volunteer initiatives, community partnerships, other departments that provide these experiences and contribute to LPP development. And then number 7, leadership, scholarship, and professional activity. How does your institution contribute to this broader knowledge base of LPP within your campus and outside of your campus? So are your faculty engaging in research, publications, presentation? Are your staff engaging in similar activities to disseminate this knowledge that you have gained? And then lastly, success and reflection. We want you to tell us what you've learned. What are your triumphs, sort of what challenges you faced, and how are you continuously improving? Now you might notice that assessment isn't really listed as its own sort of separate section, which is intentional this time around, because we, instead of using a separate standalone section, we wanted to kind of weave it into every part of the application. So for each area that I just sort of barreled us through, from your curricular programs to co-curricular activities, even to how do you support HR, your human resources, your staff, your faculty, we're asking you really, how do you know it's working? You need to demonstrate that you're not just doing these great things, but you're also evaluating their effectiveness. So, are these things that you are doing and putting so much money, time, resources into, are they leading to the intended outcomes for your students and your faculty and your staff and your community at large? And this is where the Demystifying Measurement course really becomes an incredible and powerful tool, because it will help you develop some skills that answer these questions. And so while we don't have an explicit measurement or assessment section, you will see it it will be referenced throughout the entire application. And I will leave you with that thought while Aaron continues our discussion.
All right, thanks, Carla. Yeah, so like Carla was saying, measurement is baked very much into the fabric, which is a mixed metaphor. You don't bake into fabrics, but it is very much woven throughout the LPP application because we believe measurement matters. And the reason we believe measurement matters and what is because we believe the public purpose issue matters. And if you want to be really accomplishing public purpose, you want to meaningfully impact the world around you, you have to have good measurement to know that you're doing that. And to quote a very famous measurement theorist, your eyes can deceive you, don't trust them. I was a college professor for a couple of years before I came to the Doerr Institute, and I specialized in teaching statistics and research methods. And I made students go through the process of designing their own research projects, kind of a standard thing done in psych majors. And I just remember this one student kind of having a bit of a breakdown when she just didn't figure out, she couldn't find the right measures to ask the right questions. And she just kind of asked me, and as near as I can recall, this is a direct quote, "Why do I need to ask these questions? Why can't I just go on vibes?" And my response was that if you're just going on vibes and what you simply observe, you're not going to know what you're actually finding. Humans are not good information processors based on visual information, certainly not for abstract ideas. But when it comes to leader development, that's often how programs are assessed. You may have even heard some variety of, I know it when I see it. In fact, when I did leader development in the previous role, I was told that measurement is not relevant to the issue of leader development because it was, quote, developing a person's mind and and soul and being, and that to do so, to try to measure that in an empirical way is somehow cheapening the leader development experience. And to kind of illustrate my point about why you shouldn't just rely on, well, I know good at leader development when I see it. I'm going to turn to a different science than my own. I'm going to go outside psychology to biology. And for a fun little exercise, I wonder if everyone can tell me in the chat what you think this animal's closest relatives are, or one of its closest relatives. If you had to guess what you think this is related to, I'd love to see what people come up with. And I promise this is relevant. This is not just a fun little distraction for me. Beaver, rat, yeah, otter, muskrat, gopher, marsupial, beaver, gopher. Yeah, we're getting a lot of the answers. Platypus. That's a new one. Marmot. It does look a lot like a marmot. This is the rock hyrax. It is native to Africa, and I'm about to show you a picture of its closest relatives. No one ever guesses these. The hyrax is a member of what's called Afrotherium. It's a group of animals that were relatively isolated, and for the longest time, they weren't thought to be related to each other because who looks at, this and thinks, an elephant, a manatee, and a dugong? No one's going to think that based on the eyes alone. And yet these three groups of animals, the manatee and the dugong, are each other's closest relatives. But those two together, the elephant and the hyrax, are the most closely related animals in their family, which is just wild. That's only something we've discovered recently, though, when we got tools through molecular phylogeny, we can examine their DNA and say, these things are related, even though our eyes would not lead us to that conclusion. By the same token, if you look at these two animals on this side of the screen, my left, I don't know, I think it might be stage right, but but from my left, you have a hedgehog, and here on the other side you have a tenrec. Again, for a very long time, people thought that these were very closely related animals, but they are actually about as far from being related as you can have two mammals be. But again, eyes suggest that because they look alike, that they must be related. Molecular phylogeny in the 1990s revealed actually no, it's not that. These are not related at all. And in fact, the tenrec is another member of Afrotherium. We always return to that. Um, Now, as much as our eyes can deceive us when it comes to thinking if animals are related, at least with animals, we have something tangible. We have something we can look at, we can see, we can observe. But when it comes to an idea like leadership, uh, that's that much harder to actually observe and meaningfully see. I could go to Africa, find a hyrax, and put it in front of you. I could put any of these animals in front of you, but can I put the abstract concept of leadership in front of you? Probably not. And yet we still want to measure it. We need to study it. We still know this thing exists and it's good. And that brings up this idea that leader development is an empirical issue. Like the same way one might ask, are these animals more or less related to each other? One can ask about leader development. Can we make people better leaders? How do we know a leader development program is working? And what approaches work best for leader development? Now, these are all falsifiable questions. They're all very important questions to ask. That's why we have, we have leader development as one of the most uh, funded fields currently working. But at the same time, if you don't answer these or ask and answer these questions the right way, you can really be left in the lurch. And a lot of that comes down to measurement. If you want to ask these questions, you have to have the right measures because the measures are what you use to ask the questions. And if you use the wrong measure, you end up relying on your intuition, you end up relying on your eyes, and you're often left in the lurch. So beyond just answering questions like these, there are other benefits to measurement as well. And that if you have concrete measurement in your leader development efforts, you can really increase stakeholder engagement and interest at all levels, whether it's students becoming more interested because you can say, hey, as a matter of empirical assessment, of impact assessment, we know that this leader development program works. That appeals to students, that appeals to to faculty, to staff, and to campus leadership itself. Furthermore, measurement principles, they are accessible and they're equitable. Good measurement doesn't need a ton of resources. I'm not going to pretend that the resources don't help and that you can't, have different levels of assessment based on your resources, but you do not need, something like the Doerr Institute on your campus to use measurement to effectively to perform an impact assessment. And then most importantly, measurement addresses human bias. Again, as I said earlier, humans are just biased information processors. Most of our thinking is automatic, and we aren't aware of that fact when we're thinking. And so we tend to think we're being objective and clear and reasonable even when we're not. And even though phrases and terms like confirmation bias and groupthink have become more of the everyday lexicon in our society, we are no less vulnerable to those pressures than we were before we knew those terms. So measurement is the tool that helps us overcome them. Now, when it comes to the issue of measurement, we do want to emphasize this idea of equifinality, which as an academic, I'm allowed one big word per presentation, and so this is my big word, as equifinality. And it's just a fancy way of saying that the same outcome can be reached through different paths. And that's really important for us for LPP, because even though we have this broader definition of what LPP means, it's ultimately going to be up to you to decide what that means for you, and what the right path is going to be for you will very much depend on your context. But however, at its core, there is still the same question of, can your program develop better leaders as defined by your context? So it all reaches the same question in the end, but we want to acknowledge that, the way you want to reach it and the way you're going to develop these leaders, and thus the measures you're going to use, might be different based on your own context. So I want to bring up a couple of ways measurement plays into the LPP application itself, starting in section 2. Campus and community LPP context. That's where you're going to define what LPP means on your campus. And this is basically what we call in social science the process of operationalization. We are defining a construct in a measurable way because that construct cannot be directly observed. It's not always simple. If you don't do it right, what you think is a hedgehog is actually a tenrec, to go back to my earlier metaphor. If you don't define your constructs appropriately, they can be really hard to measure. But by the same token, defining them in a measurable way right from the start makes everything easier. And that's how our assessors are going to be looking at LPP applications. They're going to be looking right to this section and going, what does LPP mean to you? How are you defining it? And then looking back to this section as you talk about measurement to see, are you evaluating your program in a way that actually gets at what you want to get at? So right from essentially the very start of the application, measurement starts playing a role. And then we move into section 3 with institutional factors. We have section 3.2, describe how your institution defines success with regards to its commitment to LPP. So first you have this definition of LPP and what you want to be pursuing, perhaps a grand, maybe not abstract, but more superordinate, far-reaching, big overall level. And then you're going to have to do it again. You're going to have to operationalize again in terms of, this is what we mean by having successfully developed a student. Earlier in our conversation when Carla was asking what LPP means for y'all, we had a lot of commonalities, but we also saw a lot of, nuance there, that different campuses, some may think more in terms of servant leadership, some may think more in terms of transformational leadership. And these are all good leadership models, but they're not going to all be measured exactly the same way. And success will probably not look the same under every model. It probably won't look the same at every campus. So you have to define that for yourselves in a concrete and measurable way. Now, moving ahead to section 3.13, I'm not going to read this out loud because the idea of reading it out loud makes me want to scream. So I am going to break it down a little bit in terms of how measurement plays into this. And what you're saying in this section is, you are asked to describe your overall approach to measuring the outcomes and impact of your institutional commitment to LPP. For example, who is responsible for gathering the data? Now, this might seem easy. Okay, we'll just get a psychologist, we'll get a social scientist. That's not necessarily the same thing as a measurement person. In fact, this is something that, nobody likes measurement people in terms of reviewing, at least. Some of the most broadly used constructs can be still really hard to measure. So, for example, narcissism. Everyone agrees narcissism exists. Narcissism has been something studied in psychology since Edward Titchener. It goes back to the very basics of the modern discipline of psychology. But the measures can look so very different, and some of them are very much not good, and that's caused problems in both the research psych and clinical psych world. Because even though these were narcissism experts, they weren't measurement experts, and their measures weren't accessing what they thought they would. So you have to find a who for gathering your data that knows how to gather it the right way. Second, there comes the question of, what kinds of data are you getting? What domains of experience are you accessing? Is it just self-reports? Is it thoughts, feelings, behaviors? What type of data are you going to use to demonstrate that your program is working? The most commonly used questions we find and have found for years now that people use to assess leader development programs are things like, how much did you enjoy it? Would you come back? Would you invite a friend? But you would probably get the same answers, if not higher rated answers, if you threw your students a pizza party every week. They probably would enjoy that. They would probably bring a friend because nothing motivates college students like food. And yes, they would come again. Pizza. But what of those questions actually accesses the idea of leader development? Nothing. So what kinds of data are you gathering is a really important question. Furthermore, if you're just gathering, self-reports, just students saying, "Yes, I feel like I was a better leader." Well, that's great that they feel that way. But is there any behavioral validation of that? A student might say, "I feel like I'm a much more developed leader." And then the way they're actually behaving out in the real world doesn't bear that out at all. But if you're just asking them for their thoughts on themselves, you will miss that piece, and you might not feel that, and you might not realize that your program hasn't worked. By the same token, what we see with certain phenomena, like say intellectual humility, when students get developed and they grow, they get more self-aware, they understand better who they are and how they can more effectively lead. Sometimes their confidence and their self-efficacy take a slight dip before it rises again. Very similar to the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? They realize what they don't know. So if you measure them there and you're just using self-report, it might actually seem to you that your leader development program has been actively harmful. But again, if you'd gathered behavioral data of how they're acting out in the real world, how they're interacting with their peers, or people that they're leading in organizations, well, that's where they're acting differently, and that would be where you would see the program working. So what kinds of data are gathered is a huge question to be able to answer. Then there are other questions that are more simple to answer, but no more difficult to accomplish. Things like, how are the data managed? Or how are you storing it? Can you manage it? What's the best form to put it in? What about Qualtrics, Google Forms? How are you analyzing it? And I don't even mean in terms of what statistics you're using. I mean simply in terms of what program are you using? Are you using R, SPSS? Do you have one of those people who likes to use SAS as their statistical package? You don't know. But these are tangible and important questions when it comes to the LPP designation. How often are they gathered? So if you're doing an impact assessment, you need to gather it at least twice for pre and post. But it might be beneficial to measure more often depending on what you're measuring. So being able to answer that question is important. And then finally, how are the data used? Are you using the right analyses? Can you trust those stats? Do the data validly map back to your definition of LPP? These are all questions that have to be answered in the application itself. And I know I said I was trying to break this down. I acknowledge you probably still feel a little bit like screaming. This is still a lot, and I know that. Um, I could go on. I could go on to keep describing how this does continue throughout section 3, in terms of different ways measurement plays into these things. You have to justify why you choose measurements that you choose. You have to talk about how that data is going to be used, and you have to describe the findings of those assessments. But I won't go into a ton of detail. Instead, I'll talk about why demystifying measurement exists, because it's easy to complain about things. It's very easy to point out problems, and it's a lot harder to fix them. And that's why this course exists. This course has its origins. Many of you probably already know I'm not the first instructor for this course. I'm very privileged to have taken it over from the Doerr Institute's managing director for measurement, Dr. Ryan Brown, who helped write both the textbook for the course, Measuring the Mist, and Leadership Reckoning, which was the kind of the first big publication to come out of the Doerr Institute. And the Leadership Reckoning pointed out a lot of problems. But as we kept talking to people, as we kept looking at what other people in this space were looking at, we kept coming back to the fact that even though there were a lot of challenges in the leader development realm, a lot of these challenges came down to the fact that no one was helping people measure in a better way. So we decided to create a course that gives people the knowledge, the skills, and the agency to measure what matters, to quote John Doerr himself, and to do so in a way that would help them achieve this Carnegie classification that we were developing and helping develop at the time. So the mission statement of the Demystifying Measurement course is that demystifying measurement equips you to design, evaluate, and defend leader development initiatives using practical, evidence-based measurement tools tailored to your context. We will take you through the entire process of an impact assessment. We will talk about how to communicate that assessment. This course is designed to leave you able to not just do the impact assessment, but leverage it to improve programs across your context and do so in a way that fits your context. This is not somebody from the Doerr Institute coming down off Mount Sinai with the one true plan for leader development. There is no such thing as the one true plan for leader development. This gives you the principles and the skills to work and create the best plan for you in your context. So the course has 2 phases to it. The first is what we call the seminar phase. There are 6 weeks of seminars, and here's where we cover the basics of measurement and evaluation. I want to emphasize it's not a stats course. I love stats. It was my favorite class to teach. I was lucky that I got to teach it in grad school for all 5 years I was there as an instructor of record. I loved teaching it as a professor. I love bringing it up in conversations now. Other people don't like that, but they chose to talk to me. But what I don't do is bring stats into this course. This is not a stats course. It's not about numbers. You will not have to do math. It's instead talking about the broader level process of impact assessment. It's about defining, measuring what matters for you, choosing the right tools that work to measure what matters in your context, creating an actual plan that works and that you can use to communicate your findings, and then leverage your evidence to both improve your programs and engage your stakeholders. So that's the first phase. We have 6 weeks. The class meets is on Friday afternoons for roughly 3 hours with breaks embedded, and it's designed to be more like a seminar. There is more of something of a lecture component, but it is far more designed to be a seminar. We talk to each other, we learn from each other. As trite as that sounds, it's also very true. And we even look at example impact assessment plans to kind of learn from the mistakes of those who have come before, as well as leverage the strengths of those who have come before. The second phase of the course, which takes about roughly another 6 weeks, is we call it the consulting phase. What it basically is it's where you create your own impact assessment plan based on everything we've worked over the first 6 weeks, and it is tailored to you. You'll have time to work with me one-on-one, where I essentially serve as a consultant for you to make sure that what you walk away with from this course will work for you. It's a pass-fail course. There is a digital certification, this little fancy measurement specialist badge. But what's far more important to us is that you walk away with something that matters and works for you. So if you do that, we will be happy to give you the certification, but we're far more interested and invested in making sure that you are getting what you need out of the course. And this year especially, we are tailoring this to LPP applications and really trying to make sure that what you take away is sort of a proof of concept for how the process of measuring LPP works. This is something you can not just apply to a real program in your context, but show to other people. And as you apply for the LPP designation, you're thinking of applying for the LPP designation, you can say, this is what we would have to do. This is what it would look like. So for a little bit of just brief housekeeping about the course, we are doing rolling admissions, but the final application due date will be on August 23rd, so we have a little bit over a month left, and I'll make the final decisions on August 29th. Class begins on September 19th, so there's some time in there to pay. It does cost, we are charging $1,000 for academic and nonprofit participants, but we don't want costs to be prohibitive. So if you do have questions or concerns about this, please do reach out to us. We want this to be accessible to you. And this is just because of the scheduling of the course and when the applications will be due. This is the last time the course will be offered before this round of LPP designations, or applications, excuse me, comes to a close. So with that, this QR code leads you to the course application. I think Carla, can you drop the link for the course application in the chat as well if you prefer to do that? My email is up here as well as Carla's, and I'd be happy to take any questions anyone has at this time.
Thanks, Aaron. And while questions come in, and Aaron takes a breather, I want to thank Aaron for coming on and talking more about measurement in the LPP application. I just want to say that in the 2024 cohort, I can think of successful applications. And I'll emphasize that no application is perfect. So even once some of our best applications had room to improve, and even some applications didn't have their assessment plan totally figured out, and that's okay. But the successful applications, or some of them, had or were able to articulate really clearly what LPP was for them. So they operationalized, what it meant, or how they would measure success for LPP. And they were able to very concisely and precisely sort of explain how they measured all these mechanisms that Aaron mentioned, who managed that data, what kinds of software or tools, or where that data resides, what is being measured. So things like, we have this list of attributes or competencies, 10 or 12. And then based on those competencies, we use the knowledge, behavioral, and affective sort of scales to measure these things. And they went on to explain, the scales or the instruments that they used to measure that. So all this to say that measurement is really important, or assessment is really important in the LPP application, but it's also okay to not have it all figured out yet. That is what this course, hopefully will aid you in doing. The course is just one tool, right, to do this, but it is a great tool. And even not having these assessment mechanisms in place or readily executed by the time you apply is okay, because you are also able to provide, to some extent, concrete plans of things that you do not have in place yet, but are looking to do for things that you don't have the answers to yet, if that makes sense. But I see Art has a question, so I'll let Aaron answer that.
Yeah. So great question from Art. Can you give an example of how to go beyond simply measuring frequency or feelings and actually measuring leadership behavior? Yeah, I can. There are a lot of different ways we do this. And we keep expanding these, but one really simple way we do is by using essentially a version of peer assessment or 360 assessment. We will have them generally 360 does refer to above, below, and subordinates, peers, and supervisors. But we generally have peers and supervisors, like teachers and such, rate them. We have them give us when they're doing a module with us or doing a program with us, we'll ask them, okay, can you give us the contact information of people who could give you this information? We pay them. We incentivize them to fill these out, and then we can get these rankings back. And sometimes that's really happy data to have that lets us know, hey, this is having an effect in the real world. And sometimes it gives us a bit of a cold dose of reality when students are filling out measures about how they think and feel. Everything looks great, but then we can find, oh, well, actually, in terms of how they're behaving every day, even in leadership contexts, we're not seeing all that much difference. Another way we will do it is in terms of leader emergence. We'll just see, do we have people who are more likely to get into leadership roles after doing a leader development program? We'll also even sometimes have true behavioral measures from them. This is something we're learning how to leverage AI in doing, and have them create a personal development plan for somebody. Have them practice giving feedback, not in a mock trial sort of like give feedback about this imagined thing to another person, but instead give a real feedback plan to an AI, and then using benchmarked and evaluated prompt evaluation that can then be given a score. So it's not just, oh, this is good, this is bad. We're not doing thematic analysis or qualitative analysis, but we are using coding to look at what we're seeing and saying, okay, this is showing a marked improvement. And we really like doing that with things like feedback and conflict, but there are other ways you could do that as well. So there's a ton of different ways you can look at successful leadership behavior. And kind of as Carla said in the chat, it just kind of depends on what you're looking to do and what you define as effective or successful, not successive or effectful. But what you define as effective or successful will determine how you measure it. Yeah, Jason, are you asking a question?
Yeah, thank you. This is great. Appreciate your time and your insights here. I have a question about the course dates. I see that they're scheduled for Fridays. We do a lot of our own development work on Fridays, and I see some conflicts, already from my own schedule if I did want to participate. So I was just wondering about flexibility if someone can't make one of the sessions. Are they recorded, or are people, does that kind of exclude folks, or?
We do have people miss 1 or 2 sessions. That's not unusual. We do record the sessions and will send them there. It is important to note it's not doesn't really work as an asynchronous course. So we do like if somebody's gonna miss probably over half of the modules, that could be difficult. But if you're gonna have to miss one, or if you're gonna have to come late or leave early, we will find a way to work with you. Um, it's not incidental to the class in the sense that there's a lot of, again, I know it sounds trite, but that learning from each other, especially uh, as the semester goes on and we get into the more seminar parts, and people will learn, kind of, you meet your peers, you talk to your peers about what evaluation means for them, and that sparks these generative ideas for you. That people find that really valuable, and that's kind of hard to replace. But as much as we can, we will give you a chance to make it up.
It's
Uh,
helpful. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Phyllis.
Yes, hi. I'm Phyllis Collins from Delaware State University, and we've developed a academic program. We're looking at creating like a stackable leadership program through our AA, BA, and a master's degree. So would that type of program be something that we could use to apply for LPP?
I'll let Carla answer that one.
Hi, Phyllis. I would say yes, but we also want, or the LPP application is designed for campuses to apply as a whole. So while you will be asked about programs like that, which sounds amazing, you will also be asked about other programs and departments across the university. So the application is not meant for one school or department, but the entire campus, if that helps.
So I would have to really get the president and everybody on board to participate in something like this.
It yes, it definitely would facilitate a lot. I think in the past, I can speak from folks that have asked for guidance in getting buy-in from senior leadership and all that. And I would say people are mostly very intrigued and interested and excited to use the classification, the process as a growth tool, because you will go through a lot of
Yes,
information, things
yeah,
that you didn't even know were happening on your campus that are so great. But you will also gain a lot of visibility for your work across campus and for your college or university once you get the classification, if you do.
right, the national classification. Okay, thank you. And you guys are available to chat offline?
Yes, please. I also, and I will follow up this webinar with more information, but we have this great online platform called Higher Led, where you can join for free. You can browse resources, and I also host all these Q&A sessions or open office hours where you can just drop in and we can have a chat if you want. And I'm also available via email and Zoom, because this is quite literally my job. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you so much, Carla. That helps. Appreciate
Of
it.
course.
Bye-bye.
Any other questions, burning questions for Aaron about measurement, and regular questions for me? All right, well, I have linked a direct link to the sort of application. Oh, Tony has a question. Sorry, I may have missed this, but you need to take the course in order to apply for LPP designation. Oh, great question, Tony, and no, definitely not. The course is not required or in any way necessary for you to apply for the classification. We are just bringing it or sharing it with you as a tool because, and I'll give you some more context that I may have not missed, at the very beginning, but with the 2024 cohort, the very first cohort of the classification, one of the more pressing challenges or the questions that we often got were about assessment and measurement. So folks were feeling like they didn't have enough resources, they didn't have enough time, or even the practical sort of knowledge to come up with these assessment mechanisms or to design all these complicated sort of systems around assessments. And we figured we would share what we knew because at the Doerr Institute, like Aaron said, we do believe in measuring all that we do. We even host these amazing little data parties that Aaron co-hosts with our measurement director, where we go through all the data of our program. So we sit through and say, does this work? How do we know that this worked? How is attrition? How is attendance? How is registration? But also how are these students developing as leaders? And so we thought we were doing a pretty good job at that. We were classified, or Rice University was classified. I had no part in that application, but we figured that we would share with folks what our measurement team does. And it's a lot of what Aaron described about the consulting part. So when our student programming team sort of sits down with Aaron and Ryan and says, hey, we have this idea for this amazing new program. It's based on all these, different workshops. We're also throwing some coaching in there, and we're doing it on delivering feedback. We want to measure if it works or not. And Aaron and Ryan will just sit down with the student program team and say, okay, what is you actually want to measure? Because we can measure this concept or this other concept. And there's a lot of just going back and forth and designing the program, designing the mechanism that will measure if it's effective or not. And that's that critical thinking part, or those measurement skills and looking at programs with that sort of measurement brain, I don't know, is what you will gain from the program, and knowledge on, types of scales, concepts, behavioral patterns, etc. Is also what you will gain. But we are in no way saying that you have to do the measurement course for you to go through the LPP classification. It's just meant as another tool that you can use or not use. I will also always be available for questions on the application, on your journey through the LPP application. So there's that too, but I'm no Aaron or Ryan. So I encourage you to explore the measurement course if you're interested. And if not, we also have some, available resources as the sort of classification team that we also provide for you. But it's not as detailed as the measurement course, is I guess what I'm getting at. But that answer, Tony, I'm sorry, went on for at least 10 minutes. So I'm sorry. Are there any other questions?
The info session tomorrow, is it a lot of what we've already heard today, or is there additional information, Aaron, that you'll be sharing about the course that would be useful?
There is a lot of overlap. If you do attend, I ask that you not spoil my Hyrax elephant surprise. But we do go a little bit more in depth into what the actual nitty gritty of the course looks like. If you don't want to attend both of these or anything like that, I'm also very available. I'm my email's up here. I'm available offline. I can find some time to meet and talk about that as well. Probably not next week, as I'm going to Academy of Management in Denmark, and I will be 7 hours ahead of everybody. But certainly within the next 2 weeks, I can come and meet people and have questions about that. And yes, Chelsea, it's so it's at 1 Eastern Standard Time. It's at noon Central Time. We are at tomorrow. We are in Central.
Great. Well, if there are no other questions, I'll let any of you that need to drop and leave us do that. I'm so happy that you were able to join us. And thank you for coming. Our emails are on the screen, so please feel free to email us with any questions, set up any meetings that you need more clarity on. But thank you so much for coming, and we hope to see you either at the course or at one of my info sessions or open Q&A sessions to talk more about LPP or measurement. Bye,
Thank you.
folks.